Good morning, or actually I should say good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see a lot of you again. I haven't seen you in a long time. So as Barry said, I'm Amy Hanlon Rodemick. I just call me Amy HR. One of the things that we've been experiencing here at Global Logic for the last couple of years is watching some significant paradigm shifts that have been happening in our world and starting to see how that might be shifting our thinking around our profession of human resources. And so what I'm going to present to you here today is our thesis on where we think HR 4.0, what is that all about? What is the next evolution in our profession, and kind of what are the different paradigm shifts that are leading us in this new direction? So again, I'm a practitioner, I'm not a researcher. This is based upon our experience here and kind of the thinking at Global Logic and what we're trying to do. One thing I should point out too is that Global Logic was recently acquired by Hitachi. So we are a 25,000 person company, about 1.2 billion in revenue. And we were acquired by Hitachi back in July for 9.6 billion. So that company is a 110-year-old company with an average age of about 45, 46. And Global Logic we have our average age of about 28. So we have very different demographics, very different populations. And so a lot of this thinking is a derivative of exactly what we've experienced here with our own population in the last couple of years. So what we've recognized here is we've got three major paradigm shifts that are impacting our world. We're sort of in the middle of this perfect storm. We've got the fourth industrial revolution, which is changing the way we interact with technology. We've got the millennials and Gen Zs taking over the workforce, and we've got the COVID factor. All these three paradigm shifts are sort of swirling around each other and causing a lot of us in a CPO's chair to think, well, we need to be rethinking how we manage human beings in organizations. Are we going to be, stuck in this virtual world indefinitely? Do we need to rethink that and think about possibly hybrid workplaces, that sort of thing? And then what do the younger generations want? What are they looking for? How do they interact with technology? So all of these things sort of swirling around us has got us thinking in different ways about what the future holds for us. So to start with the first paradigm shift with the move into the fourth industrial revolution. So over time, we've gone through three industrial revolutions, starting with steam technology, really starting to propel like locomotive trains and opening up further transportation opportunities. Then you have the electricity revolution, that driving more capabilities in terms of homes, in terms of factories, really opening up the world in a lot of different ways. Then when we move into the 1900s, we see this computing revolution, which absolutely exploded and has completely changed the way we interact with the world. And now we're in the fourth industrial revolution, which is the intelligence piece. So that's looking at if you have a smart car like a Tesla, you've got these amazing capabilities that can really help like the car navigate the road. Errol, I know you have one, so I know you know what I'm talking about. But more than that, we have smart refrigerators. We have these devices where you have Siri, hey Siri, find me anything I'm looking for. And we've got these smart watches. We've got all these different digital assistants that are out there. So that is the latest wave that we're in here, is the intelligence evolution. And that's impacting not only our daily lives in terms of what is available to us in terms of technology, but also as these younger generations are coming up and starting to move into the workforce, these are your digital natives, and they're demanding more and more of this type of technology in their daily lives. So taking us to the second paradigm shift, which I never in a million years thought we would have to deal with this, but for the last 2 years, our central preoccupation has been with COVID. I know for myself, the first year was just trying to protect employees, make sure everybody was safe, make sure that as we went through these variety of different spikes with COVID, trying to make sure that everybody had the resources they need. I know when India's second wave hit last spring, we were working really hard to stand up 24/7 hotlines for people to try and help them find hospital beds and oxygen. And now that we're seeing vaccinations start to permeate more and more, there's more focus, not so much on the protection piece, but more on, well, what's next? What does this mean in terms of what does the workplace look like? So my company, much like other companies, we pulse people at a couple different junctures along the way to ask them what is their preferred mode of work. Do you want to work remote? Do you want to work on site at an office? Or do you want a combination of the two? And overwhelmingly, people want to work remote. We had 75% of our workers say, if we had to choose, we would choose to work remote. Because we've seen a lot of these behaviors where people say, well, you know, I can go to Mexico for 6 months and sit on a beach and work there and be just as productive and enjoy a nice atmosphere. Or a lot of people are going back to their hometown and staying with their parents, and they're not having to pay rent. They're able to, you know, enjoy more time with their family and, you know, not have to deal with the commute or not have to deal with the high rents. So more and more, this work from anywhere is not only becoming our normal daily lives for now while we're in the midst of COVID, but it's becoming more of an expectation, especially amongst the younger generations. You may have seen in the press, companies like Apple, they wanted to impose a 3-day work on site, and that backfired quite a bit. My company, because of the nature of our business, we are able to say you can continue to work remote as much as possible, but occasionally a customer may require you to come on site, and we would never force anybody to do it, but just be aware that that's a possibility. But more and more, when we see people leaving the company, it's never because they don't like Global Logic. People in general really like working here, but what they tell us is, well, my new company will let me move back to my hometown and still get the same pay that I'm getting in the city. And I can stay with my parents. I don't have to pay rent, and I can work from wherever I want. And it's not always very practical, but that is definitely something that's top of mind right now for a lot of us out there. The other tricky thing is there's a strong need for collaboration tools in this virtual world. It's very tough to stay engaged in this two-dimensional setup. So I know a lot of companies are getting very creative with how are they creating collaboration opportunities, how are they engaging employees. For our company, for one, we have a standing medium that we call the Global Logic Cafe, where every week we have at least 2 different sessions. Last night, I hosted a session on mental health. We brought in a psychologist to talk about some strategies for keeping yourself sane in this virtual world when we're all working so much. We do yoga classes, we do dance parties, you know, you do all kinds of different things just to break, you know, break the day up and have a little bit of fun and keep people engaged and motivated. But more and more, I think we're going to start to see more need for stronger collaboration tools. Then the real focus is on the digitization of the workplace. So over here, we're looking at digital assistants, we're looking at on-demand learning platforms, SuccessPass, which I will explain in more detail in just a bit, but this is an idea that came out of all of this, of all of the COVID-related activity. So next, we've got the demographic shift. So right now, we've got the 4 major generations in the workplace, with the millennials and Gen Zs starting to really take over as the majority of the workforce. In fact, it's estimated that by 2030, it'll be 72% of the workforce. This is throwing a big glass of ice cold water on a lot of companies that aren't necessarily prepared. And I've talked with some of those who might have an older population that is starting to age out of the workforce. And it's like, you really need to be thinking about this, you know, getting this next generation onboarded and trained and indoctrinated into the organization, or you're going to run into a problem when your older workers start to retire, start to move out. The interesting piece is there is a dramatic difference in the thinking, the mentality, and the expectations amongst each of these generations. So let's explore that a little bit, shall we? Okay, so first, when we think about the baby boomer generation, now these dates here will vary depending on what source that you happen to look at, but I just generally call it between 1940 and 1959. I call this the television generation if we're focused mostly on the United States, because this is the generation that were born in post-World War II era. We've got the soldiers coming back from the war, establishing their nuclear families, and, you know, getting back into things. We start to see the television really becoming sort of a central focal point in the home, where this is driving a lot of consumer behavior changes around purchasing, around leisure time. You start to watch the program and, you know, identify with the characters on the show. They have commercials that will tell you about, oh, here's the Folgers coffee, and you can go down to the A&P and buy it at A&P, right? But you start to see that impact in consumer behavior. Different advances in transportation opens up the world even more. We've got a lot of people moving from cities to suburbs to focus on building out their family. And the major moments in this generation, you've got global conflict and political unrest that's continued post-World War II. The Cold War as well, definitely heavily impacting on this generation. The workplace, highly hierarchical. The earlier generation tend to be the type that would work for one company, either for life or for a very extended period of time. There was a focus more on complete separation of work and life. You have more of your 9-to-5 type jobs, and the management ethos is really, let's find out what employees are doing wrong and fix it. I know when I first started working, that was my first management training class was, okay, your job as a manager is to find out what employees are doing wrong and correct it. And it was a lot of, you know, this is how you correct behaviors. This is how you get people back on track. Now the Gen Xers, this is my generation. I call this the MTV generation because our generation came about and we started to grow up in the time frame when you start to see MTV is born and you start to see the advent of the celebrity, right? You see the rock star that you listen to on the radio. Now you can see them on TV. You see the clothes that they're wearing, the cars they're driving, the houses they live in. And that's changing and driving consumer behavior. You have shopping malls pop up, and that's a center for social activity as well as purchasing different items. Personal computers are starting to become the norm. You start to see the introduction of the cell phone. I remember the first cell phone was like this giant, came in this giant box and you had to carry it around, you know, and you pull it out. And then they had the standalone cell phone. It was this big and it weighed like 10 pounds. And now we have these devices that have more computing power than they had on the first rocket to the moon. So it's pretty incredible what we're seeing. You also see feminism, right? The feminist movement has changed a lot of behaviors. You start to see more and more women entering the workplaces and taking on a lot of more traditional male professions. Idealism is dead. We had the countercultural movement in the late 60s that really started to drive a lot of different mentality around how we view the government, how we view you know, this idealistic time in our lives, and start to move more towards cynicism. The major moments for this generation, just a couple of them here. The end of the Cold War. I remember myself when the Berlin Wall came down, and that was a pivotal moment in our history. Feminism, counterculturalism, definitely changing how we think about the workplace. So workplace still kind of hierarchical, although we started to see people jumping companies every 4 to 5 years. There was a heavy focus on work-life balance. So my second focus as a manager in the 90s when coming about was, okay, you know, we want to try and hold on to our people because they'll only be with us for 5 years. Now I'd be so lucky if I get somebody to stay for 5 years. And here the management ethos starts to shift and you start to have more conversations around, okay, now let's find the strengths in the employees and exploit them, right? Let's focus on their strengths and help them achieve their goals through that. Now we start looking at the millennials. So millennials coming in, I call this the internet generation because the bulk of these folks were children or in high school when the internet started to become the norm. You started to get that AOL disc in the mail, you know, you plug it in, you get your dial-up and you're online. And that was what they grew up with. And that opens up the world in terms of our access to technology, connections via social media activities. But that's also when we start to see some disturbing behaviors as well with cyberbullying, cyber mistakes. We see this every single day with people saying something online and that's it, you know, you're wiped out, you're crucified. We also have, I call this the YouTube generation because everyone can be a star. You just go online, you post some fun videos, and next thing you know, you've got a following. My 12-year-old daughter has a YouTube channel. She has 50 followers and she thinks she's a celebrity and is gonna get like these major contracts now. But it's definitely creating that platform for people to post their content or post the things that are interesting to them. And more and more when I talk to these younger generations, I say, well, what are your favorite technologies? YouTube is one of the highest, YouTube and TikTok. They use YouTube as their university. This is you can go and you can learn a new skill very easily. My son, he goes and he watches physics videos. My daughter goes to learn how to make slime. I learn about different management practices, things like that. It's just whatever is on your mind, you can find it on YouTube. This generation, it's really interesting. Somebody asked me one time, it was a Gen Xer asked me, oh, the millennials, they're just interested in being CEO tomorrow. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Sure, some of them want to be CEO, but most of them are just looking to try new things and advance in their careers to a certain point, but definitely not all have an interest in being CEO. This is one of the most altruistic generations that we've ever seen. They care very deeply about giving back to the community. They care about social justice, and these are very important pieces to them. For them, the major moments are the internet, 9/11 and global terrorism came about in their generation, and the rise of the celebrity. We had a celebrity president. We have, the Kardashians are like the top news every single day when I open up the internet. And it's definitely created a whole different way and different platform and way of thinking. So the workplace, we started to see it go a little bit flatter. A lot of companies really started to see, well, how can we flatten things out and create more empowerment across the board? You saw people jumping companies every 2 to 3 years. Work is life. You see it in Silicon Valley here, companies like Facebook and Google. They've got these campuses that have everything you could possibly want. They've got on-site doctors, on-site dentists. I was on the Facebook campus and they had a bakery. So if you have a birthday party and you need to get a birthday cake, you can get a birthday cake, right? And flowers and balloons and everything that you need is right there on campus. Like, why would you need to leave? Here, the management ethos is shifting, and we start talking a lot about finding meaning in work. This generation is really looking for that connection. They want to work for a company that shares their personal values. They want to know that their work has impact and meaning, and they want, the company to help them see that connection. Then we move over to the Gen Zs. So this is the digital generation. These are 100% digital natives. They have been online since day one. I asked my daughter the other day if she knew what a CD is, and she kind of stared at me blankly. So now I really know that, I'm getting older. I had to tell her that she asked what my first music album was. And I said it was the Grease soundtrack on 8-track. And I had to explain what an 8-track tape was. So they don't have any concept. This is just a completely digital group. As a matter of fact, they don't even remember what it was like when we had Netflix and you had to order the DVDs to be sent to their home. They're used to streaming activities. So that just goes to show you how advanced the technology has come in this short period of time. So their purchasing power is online. So companies like Global Logic, we're actually doing quite well in this time, because a lot of companies that were normal brick and mortar type operations are looking to digitize more and more and create online shopping platforms so their customers can buy their products online. AI and machine learning is driving the world of the Gen Zs for sure. I see both of my kids are asking Siri for everything. It's the digital assistant is their norm. Happiness and health are very important, as is families. This is the first time I've really started to hear that more and more in the workplace is I want to know that the company doesn't just care about me, but that you care about my family. I have aging parents or I have children, help me with them. Don't just focus on me as a worker. I need you to think about these other things. Heavily focused on integrity, equality, and justice as well. So they're very altruistic, much like their millennial cousins. And they're very, very curious. They want to learn new skills, they want to grow and be motivated, and they want it real time, right at their fingertips. So for them, major moments, continued terrorist attacks, global climate change, COVID-19 for sure, impacting this generation. So the workplace, now we're seeing more virtual distributed workforce, and here we talk more about work-life integration versus work-life balance. That's why you see a lot of these companies like the Facebooks of the world kind of creating that integration piece. There's a dark side to that as well, where we're seeing a lot of stress related behaviors with employees who, now that they're working from home, they're working in a virtual environment, which gives them flexibility to deal with the things that they need to deal with at home as well. It is also blurring the lines completely between work and life and causing a lot of stress and a lot of fatigue. Now the management ethos, we're starting to talk a lot more about reverse and reciprocal mentoring. I've been having a lot of conversations with Hitachi, and I've been trying to make the point, listen, you've got to get prepared for this next generation that's going to be taking over your workforce here. And the best way to do that is through reverse mentoring, is sit down with some millennials and Gen Z and ask them those questions. How do you like to be engaged? How do you like to be motivated? What types of technology do you like to use? And so we're starting to see a lot more of that type of behavior happen, and even a reciprocal mentoring where you have a reciprocal relationship with a more senior person who's mentoring the junior person on their career development, and the junior person is mentoring the older person on how to engage, motivate, and attract and retain the younger talent. More and more efforts on DE&I as well. And we've been having a lot of conversations, especially with the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. They're seeing the change in the conversation, at least the conversations that I've been having with people around, maybe we need to rethink this and how we approach this topic, because a lot of what we've been doing in the past isn't all necessarily working. So really changing that conversation. And what I'm hearing more and more from the Gen Zs is we want more meaningful conversation around DE&I. How can we get to the root issue and address the root cause here versus let's just fill quotas, let's check boxes, let's really get into it. Let's try and make some significant change. So all of these things together have really got me personally thinking about what is the next evolution of our profession? What is HR 4.0? Well, before we can talk about that, let's talk about how we got to this point. So, you know, as we've moved through the generations and as the technology has advanced as well, so has the HR profession. So starting with HR 1.0, which was the personnel department, right? This has actually been around since ancient China, going all the way into the 20th century. So it started back when, you know, you were trying to organize groups of workers based on skill set, right? And you needed a way to track people based on their skill set. You know, our profession goes all the way back. And then when we start to see with the Industrial Revolution, it's highly administrative. It's tracking workers, hours, you know, pay, benefits, the basics, like all the administrative tasks associated. Then we move into HR 2.0, which is the Human Resources Department. Still administrative, highly administrative, but moving into more strategic as well. A lot of the shift here came as a response to civil unrest and understanding that, you know, you need to treat all of your workers, you know, equally. You need to make sure you're not having any kind of discriminatory practices. It can really cause a lot of problems in terms of lawsuits and loss of productivity, those types of things. And you start to see management paying attention more and more to this personnel department. And hey, maybe we need somebody that kind of understands not only the legal aspects, but also the people components and how to manage human beings in a workplace. Then we move, as we get into the 2000s, you start seeing more and more organizations called the people team, right? That was a step away from human resources being very sort of impersonal and focused on you know, the work and not so much on the person itself. And so we call ourselves the people team. We're more strategic and consultative. And here the focus is more on employee engagement, growth, meaning and purpose, and really trying to find those connections for everyone. So now what's next, right? What is this next evolution? If we factor in the fourth industrial revolution, COVID, and the fact that we've got this shifting demographic happening in the workplace. So this is highly my opinion, my team's opinion. So really when we think about HR 4.0, we're talking about flipping the pyramid. So this pyramid over here, normally in HR departments, we've got the executives at the top of the pyramid, then the managers, then the employees. And HR teams spend the vast majority of their time at the top of the pyramid, right? And anytime there's a new initiative that needs to be sponsored, we go straight to the executive team and they own it and they sponsor it. Well, here's the problem, is that the bulk of your executives are in the baby boomer or the Gen X category. And what we're trying to design and deliver is for employees who may be in the millennial and Gen Z category. So there is a lack of connection, a lack of understanding on what those needs are and where we're going with this next wave of technology. So what we're trying to do over here is flip that pyramid and instead spend the majority of our time listening to and engaging with employees, not just to get their feedback, but to actively get their participation in the build out of key programs for employees. So that's the biggest piece, is flipping that pyramid. The second piece is taking a more holistic view at the human being, not the human resource, right? So one of the things that was interesting at Global Logic is during the pandemic, when we were about 6 months in, we ran a pulse survey to ask everybody, how are you doing, right? Is there anything you need? How are you feeling? And, we got some great feedback, and then our engagement scores went up by 5 points. And I was flabbergasted. I said, how can engagement scores possibly go up by 5 points? We had to freeze salary increases. We had to take a pay cut for our executive team. We had to stall hiring. We had to do all of these things, and everybody's stuck at home, in this awful pandemic. And what we heard from people, because me being, Miss Chatty Cathy over here, I had to go and sit down with a bunch of employees and ask them, well, what are we doing? Like, why do you think this is going up here? They all said, you guys took the time to show you cared about us as human beings. Even though these awful things were happening, the company went out of their way to reach out. Are you okay? What do you need? Like, let's do something to have some fun. Let's do these different things. And it went a long way. It was these non-material related items that really had a larger impact. So that got us thinking, well, goodness, that's kind of an interesting factor is care about me as a human being and not just what I do on the job. So during the second wave in India, we stood up a 24/7 resource that people could call, and we would find them a hospital bed. We'd get them oxygen, not just for them, but for their family members as well. So we would have people calling, my father, he's got COVID, he can't breathe. That's fine, come down here. We've got an oxygen tank for him. We're on the phone with 5 different hospitals. We found him a bed, right? And we did this for several weeks, and we were able to save several people's lives. And that went a huge way with our people. That was an unintended consequence to drive engagement up, but it was really interesting and very nice to see that connection there. So next is moving HR away from being the corporate police and being more of a cultivator, being more of a farmer of great talent, right? Is focused on their development, their engagement and activity. And then, of course, we're always going to have that aspect of our job as corporate police, but moving the emphasis away from that. Then the big piece is around the digital environment and the employee experience. So trying to create the marriage of the digital and human interaction, right? How can I create a digital workplace where everything you need is available on this device, but yet you still have a high degree of interaction with other human beings? And so that's something that we're developing. I'll get to that in a moment. Additionally, we're looking at enhanced benefits with programs that are really focused on things like wellness, on children and families. I know a lot of people really suffered during the pandemic with trying to manage their own workload and the workload of their children who were sitting at home and trying to study virtually. My solution was to start coming into the office and bring my daughter and parking her in a conference room, because that was the only way she could focus, but not everybody, of course, can do that. So we're trying to think, well, what additional benefits should we be looking at to provide support to not just the employee, but their families and their children as well. The work from anywhere concept is definitely a key part of this, and really trying to figure out, well, what does that look like going forward? Changing the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Personalized learning. This one is really critical, because one thing that I learned from managing executive development programs is that you often come in with a list of individuals who have been rated as high potential talent. And then you sit down with that person and you talk to them and you say, oh, well, where do you want to go in your career? What's the next step for you? And I have found that the vast majority of them have no interest in their boss's job, none at all. So I once went to a company, I was handed a list of 90 high potential executives, and I got the list down to 20 because the vast majority of them had no interest in moving up, right? But they wanted something different from learning. They still want to learn, but they may not want to learn the things you want them to learn. So what I came to realize is that we really need a personalized learning solution, because there is no one size fits all when it comes to learning and trying new things. Everybody's different. And then reimagining performance management is the last piece. We've been using the same old annual performance review for ever and a day. And quite frankly, we need something that's more meaningful, that's lighter touch, and more real time. And that's definitely something the younger generations are demanding as well. So when we think of all of these kind of coming together, what we're trying to do over here is create that marriage of the digital and human interaction. So creating this digital workplace that's got the utilizing as much artificial intelligence for managing workflows, digital assistants to provide support to employees. So we're getting ready to launch a digital assistant where we're piloting it in the US, where employees can just either use a chatbot type tool, or they can ask like a Siri to say, hey, what are my benefits, or what are the holidays in the US, that kind of thing. And then of course, looking at things that are that really give you deep and meaningful analytics. We just launched our shared services operation in the Americas, and the analytics that are coming back are tremendous. They're telling us where we need to make some improvements, what we can absolutely automate through a digital workflow, and what's top of mind for our employees. So the analytics are priceless. And then on the human side, we're trying to really focus more on, let's get some additional collaboration tools. Let's open up the world. So someone sitting in Bangalore can interact with somebody sitting in Poland, and they can share thoughts on a project or a key technology. Right now, you only interact with who you are closest to in your particular country. So trying to create more of that interaction. And then the social media and global interconnectivity is really critical for these younger groups, but it comes with a price, right? You gotta, you don't want to monitor it too much, but at the same time, it can go haywire. You've seen other companies get in trouble from things like this. So we're trying to find a happy medium right there. And then the personalized learning programs and benefits and reverse mentoring are key component. Now, let me tell you, this is what I'm most excited to share with you all. So Global Logic is developing something over here that we are calling success paths. So as we were having these conversations about, the impact of COVID and the millennials and the Gen Z and what's going on with them, what we started to realize is, we've got to pull our lens out. We've got to zoom out, right? We used to focus just on what happens on the job, the employee experience while you're on the clock, right? But what we've learned is that we get higher engagement when we pull the lens out and we look at that person's full life and what can we do to support them in their full life. Let's look at their wellness, their family, their fun activities, everything that kind of creates their human experience, not just their employee experience. And we also realized that when we talk about career paths, it's really about success. And success means different things to different people, right? So depending on what stage you are in your life, if you're just getting started in the workplace, you might be thinking about, I really want to learn as much as possible. I want to move around, or maybe I want to do an international assignment, but right now I'm focused on my career and I love to play soccer, right? Okay, so how do we make sure that your needs are being met? And then you have somebody else who, like myself, I've hit the peak of my career. There's nowhere else for me to go. I'm more interested in mentoring other people below me. And I'm passionate about DE&I, and I don't really play soccer or anything like that, but I like to give back to the community, and I want to, all these different things. Like if you think about all of those things that make up success to you and what it means to you in your life, how do we extract that information? So using that ethos of we're trying to look at our employees as human beings, not human resources, what we are designing here is we have created an app. And right now it made it to the finals in this contest with Hitachi, and we're being judged next week. Hopefully we will take home the top prize. But what we have done is we're utilizing our own digital engineers to develop this app where you would go into the app, complete a questionnaire that asks you questions about everything from wellness to career. Where do you want to go with your career? How far do you want to go? What skills do you want to develop? To what causes are most important to you? What type of fun hobbies do you have or activities do you want to participate in? Do you want to mentor? Do you want to mentor others, right? All those different things. And then based on your answers to that questionnaire, the app will feed you your success profile and then feed you content as it sits on top of all of your other backend systems, and it's completely agnostic. It'll pull in, well, here's some classes that are offered through Hitachi University. Here's some, soccer games coming up in your area. Here's some articles you might be interested in. It kind of aggregates everything from all these different tools and feeds it to you based on your profile. And then the piece that we've got our digital engineers helping us develop is this AI engine that would sit behind it that will learn from your behavior. So if you say you love soccer, but you never access any of the soccer activities, we'll ask you, well, hey, is this still something that's interesting to you or not? And then this way we can extract data that will help us understand as we're going into high potential planning, for example. We've got a list of 10 people that are listed as high potential, but in their profile, they've said they don't want to move up. They're happy where they're at. Well, that could save us a lot of time, right? Or we could customize learning activities or development activities for them based upon their activities and their profile as well. And we want to use it to push information and notification. So one of the things we talked about this morning was actually doing a quick one question pulse that we could send out through the app that would ask you, well, how are you doing today? You know, I'm doing great, I'm doing awful, I'm stressed out, whatever. Or, hey, we have this idea for this concept. What do you think about that, right? And it's just a great way to get a quick and easy pulse from people on board. So that's something that we are currently developing. If you will send me good wishes, hopefully I will win the contest, because if I do, I get seed money to develop it. We're developing it anyways, but it'd be nice to be able to pay the people working on it. So pulling it all together and how this is impacting my particular company as a case study in this. We are changing our thoughts around our employer value proposition. And we're trying to say, you know, not only can you come to Global Logic and build a career, you can build a life, right? We want to show that we care about our people. It's more than just the activities that they do while they're on the job, but we want you to build a life, a community, everything here. We want to drive that reverse mentoring. We're doing this more and more every single day. I have focus groups with millennials and Gen Z at least once a week. And now we've got Hitachi adopting the same practice. We are always looking at different ideation incubators for employees. We have hackathons, of course, but now we're going to be looking at formalizing some of that employee ideation. So we have an employee advisory council. And what we do is we go to them and we say, hey, we have this idea for this app called Success Paths. What do you think? And then they start to iterate on it and they start talking about, well, it should have this feature and that feature. And they're part of the creation process for these key programs that are going to impact their daily lives. And then, of course, wanting to digitize as much as possible so that HR can focus on deeper connection with employees. We can automate and digitize as much of that administration activity as we can so that we're going much, much deeper on that. And then again, on the enhanced benefits, building out for that flexible workforce of the future. And then lastly, pulling it all together with the success paths. So as far as what's next with HR 4.0, we're building this as we go as a profession. What it will be called, I have no idea. I've been scratching my head for months now thinking, well, okay, if the current way to call us is the people team, what do you call them next? You know, what, a human being team, you know, the Homo sapien team? I don't know. I mean, it's something that, you know, needs a lot more conversation and iteration, but I think we're charting a new course here and really trying to line everything up with what's happening in the digital world and what's happening with the younger generations and how they're thinking about the workplace and trying to create something that's new. So that's our thinking on HR 4.0.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Amy, my God, the response is also from the audience. We've got almost 20 people watching. They all want a recording of it as well. So you've done exceptionally well.
Thank you.
I just want to also add that Amy, for those who came in late, Amy's been on our board as well, and she's also a personal friend. And whenever we bring somebody in, one has to be very cautious to be sure we've got quality products. And I had no second thoughts, no doubts at all. In fact, she never asked to be doing this. I prompted her to come in and do this for us, and I am absolutely delighted. So, in fact, I plan to share this worldwide with Sri Lanka and India, where, if you don't mind, Amy, the recorded version, because there is so much, because these developing nations, they follow the US and the Western world, and they can anticipate starting now rather than waiting to where we were before you had to work through this whole thing while, if you like, living it. But these guys, the CEOs and CXOs, can look back and say, hey, this is where it's heading. Let's prepare. So thank you. I do have one question. Is blockchain entering the HR world at all for you guys?
Not for us yet. But I should also tell you that where Global Logic is we are easily 5 to 6 years behind in terms of our technological development. So we do not even have an HCM platform deployed at this point. We are just kicking off implementation of Workday. So we're building a lot of the foundation while we're also trying to build for the future.
Okay, audience, do you have any questions for Amy?